Well, if you're already here with us, then you've seen that the video is acting up. And so I'm going to just start here by hanging out. Oh, look at, we got Ryan here, we got Matt here. Since the video kept on lagging and looking like we were starting in 8 minutes, then 7 minutes, then 4 minutes, then 2 minutes. And then for fear that you were all going to click on my extra links that might be appearing there. And now is not the time to see all the stupid stuff I've done. Let's see, there's 3 people on, it looks like right now. That's a fraction of what's registered. We've got a lot of people who might still be joining in. I sent out a link. And so let's just hang out for a second here, guys. And I think this, well, it may not be better than the countdown video. It's better than a frozen countdown video. Looks like we're buffering. 5 people. What time is it? 10:59. We go by iPhone time. Is that production time? Oh, it's 11 o'clock. We always say go by. We say go by iPhone time. Phil, what do you use for real time? True North.
Pretty much iPhone.
All right, Matt. What about you?
Yeah, we usually go by iPhone. All the clocks on campus are kind of different times, so we usually stick to iPhone time.
Ryan, I'm assuming being at the same campus there that your iPhone time as well. You look frozen. All right. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. It's 11 o'clock Central Time. That's when we said we'd get going. My name is Joel Wetstein. I'm here on behalf of the Center for Worship Leadership. Many of you have also been part of the Worship Arts Leadership Institute, which is now the initiative, WALI. And you may have heard that the summit that we had scheduled for June got canceled because of all that's going on. And so what we've decided to do is push some content out that we believe would be helpful. The Center for Worship Leadership exists to provide empowered learning, professional inspiration, and connected support. And that's part of why we're here today. This is part 3 of a 3-part webinar. Okay, so that's why it would be, well, no, we could have part 3 of a 4-part webinar. So this is part 3 of a 3-part webinar. This is the last one. We started on Friday. Actually, I think it was Thursday. We started on Thursday with Start Your Live Stream. And that was for people in our group here that had never been live streaming before. And then on Friday, we met with TJ Winters, and he talked us through increasing engagement on our live stream. And today I've got 2 guests joining us. You may recognize these guys depending on what circles you run in. In my bottom left-hand corner, I've got Phil Grimpo. I'm going to make him go live screen. Phil, tell us a little bit about yourself, where we might have seen you, whether it's your latest movie or, yeah, how do we know who you are and what are you all about, man?
We'll only have credits on one movie. Phil Grimpo. I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska. Served as the media director for Christ Lutheran Church in the late 90s, and then started Inspire Media Productions in 2000. And we do video live production. We work with the National Youth Gathering. We work with a lot of LCMS youth events and conventions. And then locally, we work with the University of Nebraska. We work with 211 Christ Lincoln and their services, and then also at the arena and other things.
What is this National Youth Gathering of which you speak, Phil? I'm not sure. I'm just kidding. Wow, quite a resume.
Bank Stadium.
There you go. That's quite a resume you've got, Phil. Thanks for joining us today. Also, we have Ryan Hall. He's in the top right-hand corner for me. Full screen. Ryan, tell us about yourself. Where are you at? What's your story? And try to top that resume if you can. Just even if you have to make something up.
Well, I have a few IMDb credits, Phil. So I got you there.
All right.
But I'm Ryan Hall, and I serve at Concordia San Antonio, where I am the technical arts director. And my primary responsibilities are video production and lighting.
Very good. Thanks for joining us. You work with TJ Winters then, is that correct?
I do. TJ and I work hand in hand. I produce the front end. He produces the back end. Are
there a couple other people that we might know in our WALI circles that are there with you as well?
You want me to name drop? Okay. Well, we've got Adam Countryman is our
we forgive you.
Worship Arts Director. We've got Matt Preston, one of our worship leaders. Natalie, one of our worship leaders.
Okay.
And on the tech end, I'm teamed up with Kathy Baudet or McKnight, depending on when you knew her.
All right.
So we've got quite the team over here.
That's a star-studded cast at Concordia San Antonio. Hey, there's one other person joining us today. He's hidden. Matt Preston, let's see if we can turn your camera on and take a good look at this guy. There he is. He's going to be our moderator again, working behind the scenes. If you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we might be pushing out some polls from time to time. So along the right-hand side of your screen, you should see some other ways to engage in the conversations we're having, and then also with the conversations you guys can have behind the scenes. Matt, thanks for joining us as well.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate it. Let's just stay on Matt for just a second. All right, I'm just kidding.
Good looking guy.
All right, he is. All right, so I mentioned that last week we started with Start Your Live Stream. We looked on engaging people in your live stream. Today we're going to talk about tweaking your live stream, and that approaches the content from a perspective that every time we do something, we can take a mindset of getting better at it the next time we work. I like to call that monitor and adjust. It's something that comes from taking maybe a healthy critical look at the things we do and always looking for a place that can be adjusted. And it may be that we've been at this whole live stream thing for a while, or it might be that this is just a brand new thing for you. But either way, you're here because you want to work at making it better. So let's see. In our crowd today, we might have people who have never done this before. We've asked this every time we get together. Let's put that poll up there again. Tell us if you were live streaming pre-COVID or if you started with COVID. Let's put that in there now and see what sort of things we get. I don't know, let's talk about that a little bit. Churches that have been doing this for a while and the churches that are just starting, what might be some differences here between these two things? Who wants to jump into that? Phil, I think this was something you were talking about at one point. Ryan, jump into, okay?
Yeah, Ryan, you guys have been streaming for a while. At our churches, every campus has been different. One campus has been doing 3 camera shoots for years, for almost 10 years, I guess. And the other campuses have just had maybe a camera to the lobby or no cameras at all. So we had people who knew production, but we weren't necessarily streaming yet. And then that first week, we had to get all 3 campuses up and streaming pretty quickly. But Ryan, you guys have been streaming for several years, correct?
Yeah, we've been streaming since long before I came to work here, and I've been here for 7 years. I think TJ said it was early 2000s or something in his last webinar. But we've been streaming for a long time.
So with this, we had churches who had never been doing this before, and I'm looking at the poll. 75% of our people today have never done this before. So I would imagine went straight to running at this and doing your services live, which all of us in church work have been doing this for years. We've done live church services for years. So you had to punt and you went straight into doing things live. But there's other ways of doing it, and I want to get into that here today. So. Yeah, who wants to jump in on it? Phil, yeah, you're chomping at the bit. Go for it.
Yeah, so one thing I noticed that happened really quick is churches who have never done this before started stressing about how do we do this live. In the first week, there were camera issues, encoder issues, audio issues. The big guys, the churches who do this all the time, all of a sudden their pivot was, we don't have to do this live anymore. We can pre-record, polish this, and get it put out on the internet, and that minimizes our possible failures. You know, I think in live production, if we want to talk about the youth gathering, how many times we are saying, what can we put in the can beforehand, make it appear live, but not be live so that we can control the variables. For instance, even in worship, if you bring up someone to, let's say, do a testimony or talk, you don't know how that conversation is going to go live. So a lot of times, even in services, we'll put it in the can beforehand so we can control the conversation a little bit more. Well, that's what you can do when you pre-record. And I just found it really interesting that within the first week, a lot of the big churches that have been a breather. Oh, okay, we don't have to go live. We can just put this in the tank, play it back on Sunday. And the other churches who haven't done it, now all of a sudden they were freaking out about how do we make this happen at exactly 8:30 a.m. on Sunday morning.
I think I'd like to get an idea if people are going live or if there's people going pre-recorded. I think it's nice to sometimes see the crowd that's here with us and to help us know where to talk to. So I'm sure Matt's hustling right now behind the scenes to do that. That's interesting. So we don't have to go live because there's no one in the room. So what are some places we can get tripped up with that though? What do you think, Ryan? I'm going to throw a curveball at you, maybe.
Yeah. Tripped up as far as.
Well, if we don't have to go live, that means.
Okay, for an example, we're doing our music further out than our message. It was important to Pastor that he was able to preach on the current topics. COVID numbers are changing, restrictions are changing daily, things like that. So we film the message a lot closer to the air date so that Pastor has time to mold his message and be more relevant with especially his examples, if he's using current events in his examples.
Looks like we're half and half right now, streaming live and pre-recording ahead of time. Part of what I'm wondering about is when we get together for worship services, Saturdays, Sundays, whenever we do them, we're used to starting at the beginning and going straight through. If we mess up, you keep on going, right? Because we have to. There's people in the room. So if we start to go pre-recorded, now what could have been an hour-long session, for normal church service could turn into, right? Have you guys seen that happen?
Yeah, we are adjusting every week. We're doing almost kind of a hybrid. Like 2 weeks ago, we recorded Palm Sunday and Easter on one of the campuses, and then we're just playing those pretty well straight back, and we just recorded them front to back. After Easter, we're going to start recording the sermons earlier, and then we're going to have the band play live on Sunday morning just because of their time schedules, and then we'll play in the pre-recorded sermon and then come back to live. And the first week that will play live, but then right after that on that Sunday, we're going to pre-record everything for the next week. Other people are doing like what Ryan was saying, pre-recording the band or pre-recording messages and then going into post-production. So I've seen a lot of different ways to tackle this, but the big gotcha is, for instance, 2 weeks ago, we recorded an announcement of kind of how we were going to handle communion in Holy Week. And then that week it was decided we weren't going to do communion. So now we had to go back and do a post-production process. So prayers have been more generic. We're not as real time on current events as we might like to be usually in worship. But I think another caveat there is one thing to maybe consider is we also, I think, want to watch how much we're polishing worship, because when this is over, we come back to doing it live again. So what do our streams all of a sudden look like if we're putting 30 hours into post-production right now, and then we go back to the races that we were doing before?
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about how we learn from what we're doing now and take that into the future. That's a good one. Gosh, I'm trying to think here of some of what you said there. You said that you recorded Palm Sunday and Easter 2 weeks ago?
Not what is today. So on the 29th? On the 29th, we play on the 12th. We streamed live the 12th and recorded the 29th. On the 29th, while we were streaming back the 29th, we were recording Palm Sunday and Easter.
Because you already had people in the room.
No, we didn't have people in the room. We just wanted to get ahead of it. Part of the reasons were fewfold. One of our lead singers is law enforcement, and we don't know when he's going to have to quarantine, what the rules change. Like when it went to 10 in the room, he said, I have to abide by that as an officer. Who's going to get sick? On one of the campuses, one of our guys said, I had like 3 people call off this week. We got to get stuff in the can. I can't be relying on everybody to show up on Sunday morning to do this. So we were just trying to get ahead of the curve a bit. And then that also, for my company, it freed us up to do like what we did at King of Kings, to be able to do live drive-in services. We looked at Palm Sunday and Easter and said, we're going to have more things to do. So the church things in.
You kind of froze here. Hopefully what you said went through. Ryan, that's okay. Can you tell us about your schedule this week, whether you're live or pre-recorded, just to give people a sense of how you're handling Holy Week? All right.
Well, this week we're all pre-recorded. Previous services within Lent, we went live with our midweek service at noon, and then we would record that and then rerun that for our 7 o'clock time slot. But the rest of our services at this point are pre-recorded.
You're ready to go already?
Yeah.
Oh man, you guys are gonna laugh at this. So today at 2 o'clock, we're filming Maundy Thursday. Wednesday at 2 o'clock, we're filming Good Friday. Friday at 2 o'clock, we're filming Easter Saturday or Easter Sunday. And in between there, we're recording our Easter Vigil and a sunrise thing. And for Good Friday, 3 of our shoots are on location out in the community or whatever. So on one hand, what's interesting, and everybody checked it, like listen in on this for a second. Again, when you go live, you got one shot. You get that stuff done in an hour and 10 minutes. As soon as you start putting stuff in the can, to use that phrase, why are we looking at Ryan? As soon as we start putting stuff in the can, we're, at least at my church, we're turning this into this huge snowball that's going to come crashing down on us in a matter of days. I feel sorry for our editor guy. All right, so if I pre-record stuff, how do I play it back at church service time? Let's look at that. If you pre-record, you play back. How do you do that, guys? Who's jumping in on that one?
What we're currently doing is still using our production booth, and we're playing it back using ProPresenter. So we're playing it back. That's where Pastor TJ Winters is helping with that. But that allows him to intercut some of his pre-service videos and gives us some more control. But we're using ProPresenter and just using our same system to broadcast to our different streams. So we're still doing Facebook, we're still doing Apple TV, Roku, and our website.
So you're playing it back as though it's in real time.
Yes.
And you might have a song, a video, and then live speaking parts, and then go back to a play, and you're just clicking through like you would a song.
But the majority of our service is one long video clip.
Got it.
But where we need to cut in, we have those other videos and can cut those in and fire those in, depending on our needs for that service.
Okay. Phil, earlier when we were preparing for this, you talked about some stuff that we should look out for if we're going to play. Yeah. Talk to us about that and how we prepare and just a general mindset that you have about stuff like that.
Yeah, we were trying to think about the best way to play back, and we had a hard disk playback device we were planning on using. And I was at a church in town here, a big church, and they were playing back their service on Saturday night, and it started kind of freaking out a little bit. And I was with another guy from a big church. He says, yeah, we tried playing on ProPresenter. It didn't work for us, so we're trying to figure out something different. I was like, okay, maybe I don't want to do ProPresenter. I'm going to find something else. And then I was talking to TJ, and he's like, oh, we've been running on ProPresenter. It works fine. So what I ended up doing is loading it on ProPresenter. I came in at 6 o'clock that morning and ran the whole video and watched it all the way through to make sure there weren't stutters or sync issues. Sometimes when a long video plays, the audio and video tend to drift from each other. So I just wanted to make sure that I had the right computer there for playback. And then I had just copied this ginormous file from this one pre-existing thing to ProPresenter. We saw some interlacing issues. So then for the next week, I re-encoded, watched it all through again. So we just did a lot of testing to make sure it was going to actually work. I think, you know, if you have ProPresenter or whatever it is, and you're used to just playing back some slides or some 30-second clips, and now you're going to throw it a 1 hour long video, it may not perform the way you expect. So definitely do your testing.
And so if you're finding out in real time that your solution for real-time broadcast isn't going to hold up, you're going to find yourself in trouble. So bottom line is test it. Test it again? Maybe test it a third time, right? I was on the phone with, go ahead, Ryan.
And be ready for it to fail still. We had a little issue this past Sunday at our 11 o'clock service. Our band was preparing to film, so we were double using the booth to rebroadcast and prepare for recording, and we interrupted it by mistake. We interrupted the broadcast with a live shot. So you know, things are still going to happen, and I think people are understanding of that. You want to minimize that. You want to think about what you're doing before you do it, but just be understanding that there's still going to be an occasional bump along that road.
It's interesting right now on that point. I think there's a lot of grace being given. Although I think one of the tough parts is there are also a lot of congregations streaming at all different levels of production quality, and there's some church shopping going on too. worried about losing members. We don't have our streaming game up, and the guy down the road does. There was a person this week. He says, "Yeah, we had a lady on our chat the whole time dogging us about how the audio was." So it can still be frustrating. There's a lot of grace, and what we do is when pastor starts the service, we just ask for grace. On Sunday morning, everybody's watching this. There may be problems. We'll have the rebroadcast later. Hang on. So if I have people, it's buffering, it's tripping up on Sunday morning, we say then watch it Sunday night.
Yeah. What's been cool in this whole thing is that the whole world has learned that the Christian church is something that we are not dead. We are not gone. In fact, we're taking over the internet. The great World Wide Web is ours on Saturdays, Sundays for the Baptists, Wednesdays as well, Lutherans with our midweeks. It is ours. That reminds me, though, there's a couple platforms that have been handling the worldwide demand of content for years. Can anybody tell me what one of those might be? It's YouTube.
Well, YouTube. I mean, anything running on the Amazon cloud is pretty rock solid, and Netflix is on there. So,
okay. So how can we take advantage of that? And going back to our pre-recorded, okay. Ryan, you gave us an example of playing back a pre-recorded content through ProPresenter in real time. What else can we do if we've got pre-recorded content? How do we play that back?
Well, some other deliveries we've used is Vimeo and YouTube. We host most of ours on Vimeo, and then we can schedule them, but we use YouTube as well. And those allow you to load it up and fire them when you need to, or share it out via links. You could go straight with Facebook. I've heard of a lot of churches just doing Facebook Live with their phones. But as far as the pre-recording stuff, pretty much Vimeo and YouTube are the ones that we've used.
Well, and for community to have the premiere, they all have their different name for it, that this is the time we're going to watch and we're going to fire it back at a certain time so it plays live off of their platform is also a good thing. So you have community, you're at least playing it back at the same time. I think, the gotchas, as we know with YouTube and Facebook, is when are they just going to kick you off? Their algorithms, they are not right now, they don't have the staff to watch this content. So algorithms are being relied on. And I hear of churches like, I just saw one the other day, I don't know what group it was, maybe Lutheran Communicators, saying that theirs was kicked off during like the Lord's Prayer, and it came up copyright CPH and kicked them off for reciting the Lord's Prayer.
Spoken Lord's Prayer?
Yes.
They need to dial those settings down. They turned that up to 11, apparently. Turned it up too loud. Okay, so if I pre-record stuff and I'm not going live, we have a term for that. A bunch of people might know what that is, but let's talk about what is that? It's simulated live, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's to keep me from watching? Well, no, simulated live means we play it as though it's happening in real time. There's some advantages to that. We would have talked about some of that the other day in the context of engagement. Because people are using what is that? The Church Online platform.
Yep.
Who's using Church Online platform? You're not?
No.
Phil, do you guys have real-time prayer and chat?
We do. Yeah, we're right now on streaming on livestream.com because that's what my company had, and we're looking at some other platforms. Now, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but Church Online, their platform has had some problems the last couple of weeks. I know there are two major churches here in town, and it just crashed and burned last Sunday or 2 Sundays ago. So I've been trying to say, like, what are the quality ones that not everybody's clamoring to? Because some of these, internet as a whole has capacity. The big guys, YouTube and the Amazon Cloud, and those have capacities, but some of these companies that have been providing portals for churches, I don't think we're quite expecting some of the traffic, not for the video, but for the other management pieces that they've been getting. So doing a lot of experimenting right now and looking at other possible solutions.
Okay.
I think one thing that the other piece that we just need to be cognizant of is on the copyright front. Right now, everybody's been pretty lax, I think, on copyrights, but technically, if it hits the web in a live capacity, it can be if you throw it to the web, it's supposed to be different copyright rules. So I also want to make sure that churches aren't setting themselves up some bad habits for the future. That while right now I think there's a lot of grace, I don't know if that's going to last forever.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder why that.
And TJ touched on that in his webinar, and we carry. What do you say? I think it was five different CCLI, CVLI licenses to help us cover with that. But yeah, you need to watch that, especially with sermons and sermon illustrations.
Wow. Okay. All right. So we've looked at the platforms and everything. Let's start getting into the tweaking side of this. Again, we're assuming that you're working at this and want to get it better. Again, there were a bunch of people who weren't doing this before, and you're already looking for better solutions. Phil, you mentioned earlier there was a lady in the chat who kept talking about how bad the audio was. We talked a little bit, kind of what's the toss-up? Where do you focus attention first if you have to pick something? What do you think is most important? Well,
I'd say audio is clearly important. I mean, if we're not hearing the message, but it just looks good, that's kind of pointless. So some of the tweaks, like the first week we streamed, we still had people in the room, and neither of the facilities were really set up to be doing a broadcast mix. So we were pulling off the board, adjusting some levels as we needed. By the second week, we said, we don't need to mix for the room anymore. Let's just turn the mains off. And telling guys, you're not mixing for the house. We need to relook at our gain structure. We need to have the right broadcast levels. So he mixed in the room, we turned the speakers off, and then the next week we moved that entire audio console out to another enclosed space with speakers, broadcast speakers, to do a completely different mix again. So that's how we've been tweaking on our audio side. And then, so here's the thing, after we get done with this and that board moves back into the main room, how are we handling our broadcast audio? So we're starting to think about those things.
So knowing that there's some people that, in fact, I had a side conversation this week. They're using an iPad and streaming straight to Facebook Live. And we were discussing an audio interface because otherwise you had to use the speaker in the room rather than using the microphone, like right up there. So right there is a tweak. Go from an ambient mic to a direct feed. And Phil, what I hear you saying is take the whole mixer, run that into to your encoder or to your iPad or whatever you're using to send it out, and mix only for the stream, right?
Yeah, because if you think about it, and I don't get too technical, but like if this is your meter bar, right? In a lot of churches, when they're mixing for the room, the levels maybe like right down here because their amplifiers are really loud in the room, and that's where they mix, and it's loud enough, and people aren't complaining. But for broadcast, we need to get all the way up here. Well, that would be blowing out our speakers. So we've got to find a way to make that all work. Well, we just said turn off the speakers. We don't need them right now. We kicked the can down the road a little bit so that when we go in the house, we're going to have to figure that out. But there's no reason why you need to say, I can't get my broadcast loud enough because the speakers in the room are too loud. We don't need the speakers in the room right now. Wow.
That's so true. I was watching my brother.
Unless you're doing it, if your band has in-ears, what we did, so the pastor, the first week we did that, he was shouting into his microphone. He's like, why am I yelling? Well, because I can't hear myself at all. So we did put a couple little monitors down there so they could get some feedback to themselves, but that was kind of like a game day call. But I think we broadcasted, around 9 o'clock, and we were figuring that stuff out an hour and a half early that morning.
Wow.
And Phil just brought up a good point of, he said he went there at 6 a.m. and tested the video. They're figuring stuff out in the morning. Some of the best tweaking we do as the techs is we're there hours ahead of time, testing equipment, cameras, audio, and I'm tweaking before the shoot. So I've reviewed the service, took notes. I'm always taking notes on what edits we need to make or what worked, what didn't work. And then when I get there early to set up, I'm re-reviewing those notes, and I'm setting stuff up ahead of time, testing it. Okay, I need to adjust this light. I need to move the camera 1 foot to the right. I need to spike where the pastor is going to stand. We'll use stand-ins. One of the things that people chuckle at for me, but I actually, Adam let me buy some mannequins, and I use some mannequins, and I can dress them up in the robe so I can test it. So I'm not wasting pastor's time. Pastor's really busy right now, and so is the band, or they're coming in just to record and to keep social distancing. I can't be adjusting them or moving them. So by using a mannequin or even just a radio and having them, I can set those things before we ever record and make sure that everything is as optimal as I can foresee it ahead of time.
And all the things that Ryan just said are not technological. That's anything anybody should be doing. That wasn't a fancy piece of gear. It's just like pre-planning beforehand.
I've seen people use a mic stand and put a hanger at the top on the little clip, and then just put a sweatshirt on. And if they're and we've learned too, and maybe this is another thing to watch out for. Tweak what the people are wearing along the way. Last week we had some sort of pattern that was doing all sorts of crazy stuff because we've got, and it was like, okay, don't wear plaid. That's a tweak, right? Let's talk a little bit about the audio still. In our room, we have a mono system. But now at home, we might have people either with earbuds or like me on my smart TV with my surround sound. I sent a text to our tech guy yesterday. I was like, why aren't we in Atmos? How do we mix? Let's talk about music. How do we mix differently when we are broadcasting and most likely in stereo? Who wants to jump on this one?
Well, I don't know, maybe even our moderator Ryan had something to say about this.
Oh, yeah. Where's Matt?
Yeah, but in stereo mixing, you're kind of creating a pocket for the vocals. So what we tend to look at the stage, and you're going to take the drum kit and pan it out right to left, how it looks on the stage, and pan the guitars a little more right to left as they are on the stage. Bring the bass and the kick drum down to the center, and have your vocals pretty much right in the center, and maybe whoever's singing harmonies panned off a little bit. But if your guys have never mixed that way, it's going to be very different for them. I think in rehearsals, it'd be nice for them to be in another room with headphones, really figuring out that stereo mix. And then on top of that, it's dry as all get out. The room forgives a lot of sins. It forgives some pitchiness. It adds some reverb. Now all of a sudden you have a dry signal, and how many times we say, wow, I didn't realize our lead singer was so pitchy until I heard him dry.
Oh,
okay,
wow.
So now we have to have reverb and delays, and you have to mix very differently. And what we've been kind of fortunate with is all of our front of house guys have their own home studios. They're kind of a studio background. So I said, you get to mix the way you want to mix, because they're always trying to mix in a studio. And I said, that doesn't translate to live. Well, finally, they're getting to mix for studio type stuff.
Wow. I have a feeling, given, again, our poll, that people who weren't live streaming before, this sounds probably a little overwhelming and intimidating. And I want to make sure that we do a couple things. Give an aspirational sort of thing to shoot for, and then also help people close in on the gap a little bit. We've been talking for a little bit. I want to see if there's some questions. Matt is our moderator. I see you've got a few things highlighted there. Matt, can you jump in and talk us through a question? And some of them might be off topic of where we were, but I want to take a pause here and see what's going on out there. Take it away, Matt.
Yeah. You guys hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we got one question. This is our first question. So they're looking at switching or using a switcher for live stream, and they were curious if there's a better which app you'd suggest, or a way to have multiple angles.
That's more for you, Phil.
Can you repeat the question again? They're using an app?
Oh, I'm sorry. Switcher with a capital S. So I'm assuming they're saying they're looking at Switcher, the app for live stream.
Oh, the live stream
app.
Yeah.
I've had used that.
If you're using Livestream or Vimeo's platform, they do have it wasn't Livestream Producer, it's the Livestream Switcher for bringing multiple cameras. I will say about that software, it's good. We used to use that on the Pro Tennis circuit for a long time, but it's not suitable for live in the sense of later. If you want to do image magnification in your room, there's a lot of latency there. I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe OBS will, in a way, allow you to switch cast, you could do some rudimentary switching in between cameras. So those may be some options. Otherwise, Roland has some very nice small $1,000, $1,200 video switchers. Blackmagic just a few days ago released their Blackmagic A10 Mini Pro, which now has a multi-viewer. I think that's a sub $1,000 switcher. So having those hardware switchers is probably going to be a better bet long-term than something in software.
I saw a while back that Blackmagic has a thing that was specifically developed for YouTubers who wanted to step up their game a little bit, and it's $249 and has HDMI inputs, which you can get with home camcorders. And again, I got to tell you, there's a bunch of people who are way down the line on this. My brother-in-law and my nephew are using XSplit, which is what gamers use to broadcast their game platform and their webcam. That does switching. They're going back and forth between two different places there. That's yeah. Matt, do we have another question?
Yeah. So Steven wants to know, they're in the stay home, stay safe mandate up in Michigan, and he's looking for ways to still involve his music team, his worship team. And so he's curious if anybody's got some ideas going forward with like recording them at home when he can't leave. He's got recording gear, but not many other people on his team do. So how, would you go about possibly solving that solution?
I think you actually have the answer for that, Matt, in some of our conversations as staff. But the worship leader, I've seen a lot of churches doing this, can lay down a bass track and then they'll play it back in their headphones or whatnot, like a click. But it doesn't even have to be a click. It could just be a bass track that maybe the worship leader lay down, and then with another device or whatnot, then they're playing and laying down their instrument and laying down their vocal, their guitar, whatever it has. And then it takes a little bit of work, but then somebody on the back end can put those all together and get a pretty cool sound out of it.
That turns all of us into multi-track audio engineers. Yeah, you guys, this is challenging. These are challenging times we're living in to do what we do if we approach it like we've always done it. And I think Crisis is a great opportunity for some creativity. And it's also a great opportunity for some leadership stuff. I'm going to transition out of that and talk a little bit about leadership in this. Phil, Ryan, we had looked at this. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Matt. There we go. All right.
Yeah, that means go away, Matt.
We had looked at leadership stuff a little bit earlier with this, and so let's talk about that. Given where we're at now, what are we doing to maybe seize the opportunity that we're in, and also looking ahead?
Yeah, I was reminded of the line, the political line, never let a crisis go to waste.
Okay.
And that's kind of a little bit where we're at right now. As I've heard different stories from people, some tech guys have said, my pastor, my leadership, whatever, never really got us the gear that we needed. We were always doing it on a shoestring. They didn't care about quality. And now all of a sudden they're throwing their hands in the air and saying, why isn't this looking like ESPN? What's the deal, guys? And they're saying, we don't have the stuff. We haven't really thought this through. We've been telling you that we need a camera at this spot. We've been telling you we need better lighting. We've been telling you we need better sound. Well, right now, we kind of have everybody's attention and leadership's attention, and leadership is focused on how do we get good video broadcast. So right now is the time to be laying out, I don't want to say your wish list, but what are the needs that you have to make this better? Let's start getting those numbers together, because I can't predict the future, but I can almost guarantee we're going to be in this situation again. This was really easy for a pandemic to get out and shut the world down. So I think it's important to be prepared. And we've also created some new communities that maybe we didn't have before. I don't know about you guys, but our church is looking at, we have twice as many people watching online as we ever had in the pews. Well, there's probably a lot of people who just never went to church and have found us and would like to carry on afterwards. So are we just going to shut that down when this is over? Or do we need to start having all the gear in place to keep doing this well, which means when our soundboard moves back into the room, we're ready to go. We need to get volunteers trained up. I think one of the polls, I don't know if we had that poll about, did you get your gear? Did you already have it? Did you just go out and buy new stuff, or are you renting? And did you buy the right stuff? When this all happened, we were selling some camera packages, and there's a link to that. Some camera packages really quickly that were like, get up and going today type of stuff. But it maybe isn't your long-term solution for a year from now. So let's start having some of those conversations.
All right, so we're supposed to be doing this at the same time as scrambling in a new pattern from week to week in Holy Week, in a season where we might also be concerned a little bit about our budgets. I just want to throw that out there, that we're well, right? I mean, we're well aware of that. I don't know if your churches are having those conversations. I know we did. I've presented a modified budget, and we're borrowing a better switcher than what we had, and we've got to return ours. And so I'm taking advantage of this right now to say, hey, look, if we want to keep doing what we've been doing, this is what it's going to take. We don't have to keep doing it the way we've been doing it. But sometimes with pain comes an opportunity for some growth. I think that's kind of what I hear you saying. What, Ryan, talk to us a little bit about that conversation we had about our secondary audience and our primary audience, and then leaning into why again this whole tweaking thing is so important.
I think you're referring to prior COVID, when we were doing our live audience and our streaming audience.
And most of us have live audience only, and
Okay.
then or we had live audience in the room, and what happened online was secondary, almost like, let's set a camera, aim it, and leave it. And now we're going
Right.
to use. So
Right.
after this, we're going to go into adjusting video, adjusting lighting, and stuff like that. So just prep yourselves, guys.
Got it. So prior to COVID, we were streaming, and Adam said it was 14 years here in the chat. And we always had this delicate balance of what are you producing video-wise, audio-wise for your people in the pews. That's your primary audience. It's your larger number. They're the quickest to give you feedback. You're seeing many of them in the narthex or lobby after church, right? Many of those people are serving on your team, and they're getting feedback. And then we had our online audience, and you may never hear from them. So you're having to balance, and they have different needs. Is that what you're referring to, Joel?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. The secondary audience is now the primary, and in many of our cases,
So now we've just the stream. Yeah.
All right. So given that our primary audience is there, let's start working through actual practical tweaks here. And let's start with cameras. Okay. Positions, angles, quality, distances, stuff like that. So who wants to go on that one?
One thing we talked about beforehand is, we discussed the first week, there was a little bit of an audience. So pastor just talked to his audience. And we've always told the pastor, when you see the red light, look that in the eye every once in a while, because that's a person, just like you look at other people in the room. Then all of a sudden there was no one in the room. And do you still look around the room as if it's full, which our audience knows it's not, but we're comfortable with seeing it that way? Or do you start looking just dead into the camera? And when the tally light, if you have tally lights changes, do you pivot to the other camera? Do you pre-plan all those shots? Now, what we've landed on is this is your primary camera straight ahead. We may cut away to some other cameras, but really kind of focus on that one, not dead stare them down, but that's your entire audience is in that one lens. Ryan, is that similar for you guys?
Almost to the word. Our very first week, we didn't have a lot of time to prepare the whole team, and Pastor walked a little bit more like he normally does. Pastor looked around the room like he normally does, and we did a debrief, especially with just our staff, and there was comments of, were there people in the room? We thought you couldn't be there. He kept looking around. He was looking like there was people there. That threw us off. Can we be there? So what we did is we had a chance to get with Pastor and say, hey, the camera is your audience. Look, and he was fine with that. He agreed, made the adjustment right away. And yeah, Phil, we have our camera one is our primary camera. We tell Pastor, that's your audience, look at it. And when we do our cutaways, it's more just to kind of break the monotony add some interest, maybe show a illustration point he's talking about. He doesn't always look into those cameras, but the primary camera is the one that he's talking to 95% of the time. He's looking right at that camera, talking to the audience.
I'm glad to hear that, because I don't know how many people answered the poll, but so far 100% of the people who have answered use one camera. Okay. Which means that primary camera you're talking about, straight down the center, hopefully, is the primary audience. If you have a second camera, what should I do with it? Because here's the thing: since we're talking about tweaking, and what I heard, all right, we're 66-33. So what I heard you saying is you guys watched it, made an adjustment. That would be a tweak. You watch it, you make an adjustment. So if we've got one camera and you didn't have it down the center, right down the center. Now, if I have two, what do I do?
And to that point, real quick, we have a pretty strict rule about cameras being in the view or in the way of members, or a distraction to worship. Right? Worship is sacred and holy, and we don't want somebody running around distracting us. Well, now that the room is empty, most churches have that center aisle. Well, you couldn't put a camera down there because that obstructed people coming and going. It was a distraction. Well, now that there's nobody in the pews, you could put a camera right there in the center aisle on a tripod, on what have you, especially that one camera, and it's not going to be in the way. It's not going to be a distraction. There's nobody to distract, and it's right there in the middle. So that's one example. To answer your question about the second camera, I still, for the most part, believe in two camera center. One's going to be tighter and one's going to be wider, and that helps mix it up. You could go at a 45 with your second camera, 45-degree angle to the subject, but I think until you get over two, and Phil, jump in on your opinion there, but I think a center angle on a wider shot is still more valuable. And if you can have somebody manning that one, maybe moving it around to different things, then you can leave the main camera on the worship leader or pastor, whatever the point of focus is at that time.
Yeah, I agree. If you have two cameras, a tight and a wire shot, it allows the pastor to move a little bit without walking on a frame. If you don't have camera operators, it gives you a sense of the room a little bit. And on that, one thing that was interesting is now, when we produce, like, let's say the National Youth Gathering,
which is a small event. Like, what, you have one or two cameras there?
Right.
No, but the principles apply. Go ahead.
The principles apply. So there, when we're talking about it, we say it's a TV show. It's a TV show. People are, for the most part, for their main content, they're looking at the screens. There's big spectacle, and they can see the room. So the only time I try to show the room shots is for the streaming audience. But you don't need this super high wide camera to see the room because people are in the room. Okay. Now all of a sudden they're not in the room for worship. So we get to decide what they see or what they don't. So this was interesting. We were talking about, I said on the 29th, we recorded Palm Sunday and Easter. Well, how are we decorating for Easter? Like, oh my goodness, we have to get all these decorations in here. And I said, well, not really, because nobody sees the entryway and nobody sees the back of the room or the sidewalls. All we have to decorate are the 3 camera shots I usually use. So let's look at the camera shots and put a flower there and put something there. That's what we're going to see in the room. So we can control all those pieces that maybe we couldn't before when we had an audience there, and then just really capitalize and make those shots look as good as possible. I'm in churches right now where we've got cables strung all over the place. It looks like a disaster in there, but the broadcast looks fine because you can. Yeah.
What about the timing of switching? If I've got 2 cameras and they're right down the center, let's go with the recommendation here, okay? I've got 2 cameras right down the center, and I've got one that allows a little bit of room, a second one that's a little tighter. How do I pick? And I think this is a great tweak thing, and it's subtle. But how do I pick when I'm using which shot? I want to hear from Ryan. This is kind of what you do in real time all the time, right?
Yeah. So there's a couple different strategies. One, like Phil said, pastor walks out of that tighter shot. You don't have a camera, so you have a wider safety shot, kind of call it. So he stepped out of that. You go to a wider shot. You didn't lose him. Sometimes at introduction time, so the beginning of the message, you're going to be a little bit wider. Times of illustration, if pastors moving their arms up and around, or during a blessing, or they're animated, or they're showing they're talking about their shoes, wider shots. When the pastor gets real heartfelt, when they get real serious, where they get really into the point, you want to be closer. Okay, because one thing we learn in film is that you communicate with your eyes.
Yeah.
I want to see your eyes. If you're I'm going to convey and communicate emotion through my eyes, and I want to see that in pastor. If pastor is choked up, I don't want to be on a wide shot. I'm not going to feel it. Okay, pastor gets choked up. I want to be nice and close. And I'm not talking, gross close, but a close-up shot, so that I can feel that emotion and feel more like he's talking to me, the audience. One of the things we talk about in film, and I'm talking movie film, anything you do that distracts or brings attention to it is going to take your audience away, or take them out of the disbelief that they're not watching. You want them to be so into it that they don't realize they're watching a stream. They don't realize they're watching on their TV in their room. And by getting close, you can feel that emotion, bring that point home, and I'm not a fly on the back wall. This is a time for the Lutherans to move from the back pew to the front pew.
Oh, look at that.
And the camera does that.
All right, way to go. All right, Phil, cut or dissolve? Wipes, like, how many of those?
Wipes.
How many of those
Wipes,
settings
never.
should I use? The star.
All
You
the
never
wipes you can
use
get.
wipes. Wipes could just be gone. Don't need
Okay.
it at all.
No, seriously, cut or dissolve.
I use fast songs cuts. In the sermon, between angles cuts, I usually dissolve in and out of graphics. And if it's slow songs, I will do dissolves.
Say that one more time.
So if it's a fast song, it's all cuts. If I'm coming in and out of graphics, I dissolve. So like a full screen graphic, I usually dissolve. If it's the pastor talking, that's usually cuts between angles. If it's a slow song, I'll dissolve.
Okay, that's important.
I never do wipes.
So just because your switcher has a setting doesn't mean you have to use it.
Right.
I think the Apostle Paul said, well, everything is permissible, not everything is beneficial, and that includes effects on your grassroots or Ross or Black Magic and roll-in switchers and stuff.
Yep.
Guys, we're like 9 minutes into left on this already, and we had so much to talk about. I'm going to stop. Maybe I'm glancing at the outline. We have it. What do you think we need to hear from? And then Matt. Oh, here's Matt. Do you have a question for us? Direct the conversation.
Yeah, I've got three questions.
Great.
Coming way back this one should be pretty simple, but Monica wants to know, they pre-recorded children's on her phone as an MP4 and ProPresenter needed it switched to WMV and it didn't work. Any ideas why?
Yeah, so WMV, because you're on a PC. Even
Yes.
ProPresenter
she's
on
using
Windows.
10.
Even ProPresenter on Windows should be able to take an MP4. If I was doing that, I'd just re-encode it, make sure it's an H.264, and you should be fine.
Okay.
So I wouldn't use WMV. I think it's an old format and it's bloated, but H.264 should work.
Is there an encoder out there? Because there's a lot of encoding, decoding, file transfer,
And then
conversions. What is there one out there that we can post a link that you guys use?
I use the encoder that's included with the Adobe Creative Suite, which right now is free licenses are very cheap because Adobe is trying to help people out. I don't know. Trying to think if there were some other
It's been a
encoders
while
I used to
since
use.
I've used Handbrake, but didn't Handbrake
Handbrake probably would.
has some encoding in there? You could change pretty easy with Handbrake.
Yep, I think so.
I'm going to post a link. It's one that I use. I just want to tell you, pay for the premium, get rid of the ads, and check all the little boxes as you're installing, because you don't want Yahoo as your primary browser, and you don't want to install McAfee again. Okay. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
All right. What's another one, Matt? You got something else for us?
I've got two more questions. The first one, let's do best way to stream the service, including a screen.
So
it'd be like lyrics and video at the same time.
yeah, we had that situation because at the one campus because we don't typically have cameras, we were not set up with lower thirds, and we didn't want to recreate our entire song library. So I don't know if you have one of those, Joel. If you can take a look at that sermon video that I sent you, and this is kind of using some picture in picture stuff.
Let's see, sermon. Got it. Here goes a video.
So here we have our camera.
The real Palm Sunday guy. His entrance is just a wee bit different than Prince Ali's. Check it out.
And then if,
John
this is a
12.
fancier switcher.
The next day, the great crowd that had come for the festival heard that.
And then when you're
Jesus
reading,
was on
you
his
can
way
go
to
full
Jerusalem.
screen.
The next day, the great crowd.
So, that's a way to say if you have even a lot of smaller switchers will have some type of picture-in-picture to have up there. And then when you need to go to everybody reading or seeing it together, go full screen.
That's interesting. That almost looked like there was an actual big screen hanging there. That was digital, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. It was the angle that made it look like that. That's pretty stinking cool. So he was like the weather forecaster, pointing at nothing.
Right. Now the other option
and
is
software-wise, Wirecast will do that too, built into Wirecast.
Okay.
So we also will use a teaching
Yeah.
monitor. So put a big 70-inch TV right next to the pastor, and then in that wider shot is him with his graphics.
So then you don't have to be switching back and forth if you've got a tight enough shot. Everything you're wanting to show is right there. What's interesting is we had a 65-inch. It was just part of our, around the church, there's a flat screen TV, or you've got one at home. Be resourceful, okay? And the first one we put up was too large, and it was impacting how much we could move back and forth because we didn't have really good camera positions and angles. And so we actually downgraded the size so there was a little more movement room for our pastor. Yeah. Matt, you got another one, or should we go ahead?
I've got one more. Kyle asked a while back. What are some ways to ease off the drying or unforgiving nature of audio going straight into the board as opposed to mixing in a room? And I was just going to suggest using reverb, compression, and then if you have the ability to go back and take the audio out and use a quick auto-tune, a little patch in there, it really helps a lot. Phil, do you guys have any other ideas?
Normally I'd say, well, have a room mic in there, except because I've turned off the PA. Because I've turned off the PA, my only ambient audio right now is the drum set. So that maybe doesn't help as much, but a room mic would help a lot. If you're complex enough to have waves plugins and stuff, there's some other plugins you can use, but reverb is the big one, and a good ear for mixing.
Okay. We have just a couple minutes left. In this whole mindset of doing what we do week after week, and no doubt this is a big one. And I don't know about you, but I've had a sense of loss, frankly, in all this as well. Like I miss getting together with our teams. I miss getting together with our bands. I miss seeing the busy hallways and the worship centers and the feeling you get when there's people being moved right there. But you guys, I want to just encourage you. This is not going to last forever. And while I don't know what the aftermath is going to be like, I do know that we will get to live either in some future glory, Romans 8, that's out of this world anyway, or back in a place that's impacted by what we're doing. So as we wrap up, let's talk just again, finally, maybe what are some things that we're learning now that we might want to take with us?
We pay more attention now to camera angles, checking all the camera angles, who's going to stand where. We've also said, I think there's a YouTube video link that a buddy of mine and I did kind of a web broadcast the other day talking about what can we tweak on right now. Like, is now a good time for checking all your gels in your lights, make sure that they're color temperature corrected. Is now a good time to be going up and focusing your lights, something you've maybe haven't done in a long time. White balancing your cameras and finding where the best places for them to be and cleaning up some wiring. That may be some things that you can be working on right now for in the future. Some of those tech pieces that when we're in the rat race of every single week, for Easter. So for this year, we're not doing a big Easter blowout because nobody's going to be there. But we're saying when we get back together, let's do a blowout service then. Well, when was the last time you had more than a few days to get Easter put together? Now we kind of have a lot of time, so we can be having those discussions. And how are we going to decorate the building differently? Or, we've kind of got more time than we have in the past.
Another thing we're doing is we're still communicating with our team. So we're checking in one-on-one with all of our volunteers and team members, and the band's doing that, tech is doing that, and checking in with our people so that because they're also lacking that camaraderie. And so you can still kind of touch base, get prayer requests, see how they're handling it, and still have some of that community with that team.
It's important we don't forget that we are all in the business, our vocation. We're in the ministry of the gospel, and there's people still looking at us. And a lot of our conversation today has been about gear and lighting and sound and video and platforms and whatnot. Our people are still at the center of this. Many of them are consumers of the stuff that we're doing, and they used to be part of the people who helped put it out there. Ryan, I appreciate that you brought us back to that. That was a good call. Guys, it's 12 o'clock. Go ahead, Phil. Parting words.
Oh, I was going to say on training, I noticed that ACT Lighting was doing free MA3 training for lighting. Right now, software is people are giving away software keys for a while. So now may be a good time for your team to get a hold of some software and do some training, or you could make some training videos for them. Get them in the studio. I don't know. Everybody has different social distancing rules, but now's maybe a time to recoup. And then now that you're paying attention, we're using one of our campus's videos to help train the other campus. So now we can do some cross training, and we can also experiment with one thing we talked about earlier. And Concordia, you're doing this, is maybe we have 2 or 3 different worship styles. Now's the time that maybe some of those things are combining, and we're experimenting with some of those things that we haven't done in the past.
Wouldn't it be great if after this, our churches have set some preferences aside and realized that it doesn't matter as much as we used to think that it does? Well, my hope is that people are going to be so excited to come back, into their space that'll outweigh, I don't know, maybe preferences. That might be wishful thinking. Man, wouldn't that be great? All right, hey guys, let's wrap up. God bless you. Keep plugging away at what you're doing. Ryan, could you drop your email address if you're comfortable into the chat? And Phil, if you would do
I did that.
Awesome.
Yep. Now the first time I did, I missed an R, so it's I did it again there. It's Concordia, but my address is there in the comments.
One last thing too, everybody. I shared a file that Phil had given to me. He runs Inspire Media, owns it. He has a camera package type thing that's pretty much a one box. Well, probably not one box, but everything you need to get up and running. And I'm sure he'd be available for some incremental steps along the way as well. Remember, steady incremental changes. Monitor and adjust. Do what you do, and then add something to it. And then, all right. Peace out, everybody. Thank you. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Phil, Ryan, Matt, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.